When I swung open the front door, I froze in place. Standing there in the driveway was my wife, Zara, dressed in a pair of tight jeans I hadn't seen her wear in months, with a smug grin plastered across her face that had no business being in a marriage. But that wasn't what made my stomach churn. No, it was the man behind her. He was leaning casually against a shiny, black Escalade, like he owned the whole damn world. I'd never seen him before, tall, tan, with hair so perfect it had to be fake. One arm was draped around two boys who looked just old enough to understand what betrayal felt like. And just behind them, my son, Sage, stood frozen in the doorway, his wide eyes filled with confusion. Zara didn't even give me a chance to say a word. She flipped her long, bleach blonde hair over her shoulder and said, "Cassian, meet Cale and his boys. They'll be staying here for a while. I think it's time we stop pretending." I let out a laugh, but not the kind that comes from something funny. It was sharp, hollow, and broken, the kind of laugh that escapes when something inside you shatters. "Pretending about what, exactly?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. She didn't even pause. She brushed past me like I wasn't even there. Cale followed her, his kids trailing behind, dragging suitcases like they'd already claimed the place as their own. "You and me," she said, tossing her purse onto the couch like it was just another day, "we've been over for a long time. You're just too blind to see it." Sage stepped closer to me, his small hand trembling as it gripped my arm. "Dad, who is he? Why is he here?" Zara turned back, her expression smug and unbothered. "Because he's the one keeping me warm now." That sentence didn't just hit me, it detonated something deep inside. I should have seen it coming. The late nights, the sudden obsession with the gym, the new lingerie with the tags still on, and not meant for me, the way she'd smirk at her phone like it was telling her secrets I wasn't allowed to hear. But I was a fool. I thought we were just going through a rough patch. I thought if I kept being the steady one, the provider, the protector, she'd eventually come back around. Turns out, she'd already found someone else to hold her while I sat in the next room, trying to keep this marriage together with nothing but hope and duct tape. "Cale's boys are great," she added with a fake smile. "Maybe they'll help Sage toughen up a little." That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. But before I could say anything, before I could even take a breath, Sage stepped forward. My 12-year-old son, who had my eyes but, in that moment, more strength than I'd ever had, pointed straight at Zara and said, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, "You're not my mom anymore." For the first time since she stepped out of that SUV, Zara looked caught off guard. She blinked, her confidence faltering. "I saw your messages," Sage continued, his voice shaking but growing stronger with every word. "You told Cale you wanted to get rid of me because I remind you of Dad. You called me a roadblock." Cale shifted uncomfortably, his confidence cracking. Zara's face went pale, then red, then twisted into something ugly and venomous. "You little brat," she hissed. "You had no right." "He had every right," I cut in, stepping forward. "Because while you were off playing house with some knockoff Ken doll, he was watching everything fall apart and wondering why his mom didn't love us anymore." She glared at me like I was something she wanted to scrape off her shoe. "Oh, please. Don't make this into some big drama. You were boring, Cassian. Predictable. I needed someone who made me feel alive again." "Feel alive?" I said, my eyes locking on the man who still hadn't said a word. "You mean this guy?" Cale finally spoke, his voice smooth and practiced, like he'd rehearsed this moment in the mirror. "Look, man, this isn't personal. Zara deserves to be happy." I almost laughed again, but my fists were clenched too tight. "I hope she makes you as happy as she made me," I said, my voice cold and sharp. "Because one day, she'll turn on you too. She always does. And when that day comes, I'll be there, laughing." Zara rolled her eyes and started walking toward the kitchen. "Whatever. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." I'm done with this conversation. But she wasn't finished. Not even close. And neither was I. Because I had one last card to play, something she never saw coming. It all started with a file I'd tucked away in the bedroom drawer. A file that held every secret she thought she'd buried for good. I walked down the hallway to what was now my bedroom, not ours anymore, and opened the top drawer of the nightstand. Underneath a pile of old birthday cards and a tangle of charger cables was the manila folder I'd been quietly building over the past 3 months. I never wanted to believe I'd need it. I wanted to be wrong about her. But I wasn't. Inside were screenshots, bank statements, and even a hotel receipt from a weekend I'd been out of town visiting my mom in Michigan. Zara had told me she was sick that weekend. Turns out, she wasn't the one who needed comforting, Cale was, at the Hilton. There were even printed Instagram DMs where Cale had bragged to one of Zara's friends about stealing her away from her loser husband. I had everything. Proof. The whole ugly truth. I walked back into the living room, the folder in my hand. Cale was sprawled out on my couch like he owned the place, flipping through TV channels without a care in the world. His kids were in the kitchen, raiding Sage's snacks like they'd lived here for years. And Sage, my boy, was sitting stiffly on the edge of the stairs, silent but seething. I could see it in his eyes. He was burning inside. Zara noticed the folder in my hand and rolled her eyes. "What's that? You printing out memes now?" "Something like that," I said, my voice calm but sharp. She snatched the folder from me, flipped it open, and her smirk disappeared in an instant. "You've been spying on me," she snapped, her voice rising. "No," I said evenly. "I've been gathering evidence. There's a difference. And now I've got enough to make sure you don't walk away with anything but your cheap boyfriend and his snack-stealing kids." She slammed the folder down on the coffee table, scattering papers everywhere. Cale stood up, trying to play the peacemaker. "Hey, man," he said, his tone forced and smooth. "Maybe we should take this somewhere else." "No," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. "You walked into my house. You brought this mess into my family. You made it public. So we're keeping it public." Zara's face twisted into something venomous. "You have no idea what I've been through," she hissed. "You were never there for me emotionally. I was dying inside, Cassian. And all you did was fix things around the house, playing the perfect little handyman while I rotted." "You didn't rot," I shot back, my voice steady. "You wandered. There's a difference." And then, of all people, Cale decided to step in. He reached out and put a hand on my shoulder. "You need to calm down, bro," he said, like he was trying to defuse a bomb. The way he said bro lit a fire in me I didn't even know I had. I slapped his hand away and stepped right into his space. "Say that again," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "See how calm I stay." He backed off immediately, his confidence cracking. Zara, now flustered, went for the only weapon she had left. "You think a judge is going to side with you when you're threatening people in front of your kid?" she spat. "I'm not threatening," I said, my voice cold and final. "I'm done. There's a difference." And then, in the middle of all this chaos, Sage spoke up again. "Can I stay with you, Dad?" he asked, his voice small but steady. It was real. Honest. Zara spun around to face him, her eyes wide. "What? No. You're not picking sides." "I already did," Sage said, cutting her off. "The second you brought them in here like we didn't matter." Cale's kids, sensing the shift in the room, started looking uneasy. One of them, a boy who couldn't have been older than 9, whispered something to Cale. He bent down, nodding, trying to reassure him. Meanwhile, Zara crossed a line no court document could ever erase. She grabbed Sage by the arm, her grip tight. "You're confused," she said, her voice sharp. "I'm your mother. You don't talk to me like that. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I just stepped forward and said, "Take your hands off my son." She froze. I'd never spoken to her like that before. My tone was cold, final, and left no room for argument. She let go. Cale exhaled, like he'd just realized how deep he'd gotten himself into this mess. "Maybe we should go," he started. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you walked into another man's house with your toy and a welcome mat," I snapped, cutting him off. Zara grabbed her bag, her face a mix of anger and frustration. "This isn't over," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "I know," I replied, my voice steady. "It's just getting started." As they walked away, Cale's younger kid glanced back at Sage and gave a small wave. Sage didn't wave back. He just stood there, watching them drive off, like he was burning the image into his memory, making sure he'd never forget. I shut the door. Locked it. Then I turned to Sage. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice heavy. "You didn't deserve any of this." He wrapped his arms around me, holding on tight, like he knew I was all he had left now. And in that moment, it hit me. I wasn't the one who'd lost everything. She was. And the saddest part? She didn't even realize it yet. The next morning was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, but the kind that wraps itself around you like a noose, heavy and suffocating. It was the silence that comes after a storm, when everything's been torn apart and you're left standing in the wreckage, pretending it's still a home. Sage didn't go to school that day. I didn't make him. Instead, we sat at the kitchen table, sipping hot cocoa like two survivors of the same shipwreck. Neither of us mentioned Zara. Neither of us asked the questions that were clearly eating us alive. But they were there, hanging in the air between us, unspoken but heavy. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: "Your behavior last night was abusive. You're unstable. I've already contacted a lawyer. I'll be coming to collect my things with police present. Do not contact me again." I read it twice, then slid the phone across the table to Sage. He stared at the screen, his face unreadable, before whispering, "She really said you were abusive." "Yeah," I said, my voice flat. "After everything she's done." "Liar," he muttered under his breath. That one word stuck with me. It was simple, but it was the truth. She lied as easily as she breathed, effortlessly, constantly, and without a shred of guilt. But I wasn't going to let her twist the story into some sob story where she played the victim. She could sell that act to Cale, to the court, to her friends who thrived on gossip. But I had the truth. I had the receipts, literal ones. Screenshots, timestamps, messages. And most importantly, I had Sage. That was all I needed. 2 days later, she showed up with 2 cops in tow. No warning, no heads up, just a knock at the door, like she hadn't blown up our lives and expected me to roll out the red carpet. She stood there, oversized sunglasses hiding her eyes, a fake frown plastered on her face, clutching a tote bag like it was the last shred of her dignity. One of the officers stepped forward. "Are you Cassian Taylor?" I nodded. "Ma'am would like to retrieve some personal belongings. Would you allow us to enter and supervise the process?" I looked at Zara, my expression blank. "You need bodyguards now?" She gave me a tight smile. "I'm protecting myself." "You should have thought about that before climbing into Cale's car." The officer stepped between us, his tone firm. "Let's keep this civil." I took a step back, gesturing toward the house. "By all means. Let the queen of the hour reclaim her thongs and her lies." She walked in like she still owned the place, heading straight upstairs without so much as a glance at the family photos on the wall. That stung more than I expected. I thought maybe, just maybe, there'd be a flicker of regret in her eyes. A moment of hesitation. But there was nothing. She'd already checked out. While she rummaged through the bedroom, I went to the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water. One of the officers lingered awkwardly near the stairs, clearly uncomfortable. Then I heard her voice, loud enough to carry down the hall, "God, this place smells like failure. How did I live here for so long?" I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Held it. Let it burn. A few minutes later, she came back downstairs with 2 bags stuffed full of clothes, makeup, and, of all things, one of my watches. I pointed at it. "That's mine." She rolled her eyes. "Please. You never wore it." "I will now," I said, my tone sharp. The officer glanced at her. "Ma'am, if that item was purchased by him, you'll need to leave it here." She let out an exaggerated huff, yanked the watch off her wrist, and tossed it onto the couch like it was trash. Then she turned to me, her lips curling into a smug smile. "Cale's already planning to propose," she said, pausing for effect. "Just thought you should know, so you can start moving on." I stared at her, silent. I didn't flinch. Didn't blink. For the first time, her confidence wavered. She blinked, just once. That hit her, just a little, and then, as if the universe had a twisted sense of humor, Sage came downstairs holding something in his hand. It was the framed photo of the 3 of us from his 5th birthday, him with frosting smeared on his nose, Zara kissing his cheek, and me holding them both like we were the perfect family. He walked up to her and handed it over. She frowned, confused. "What's this?" "Keep it," he said, his voice steady. "So you remember what you threw away." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked outside, leaving her standing there with the picture in her hands. One of the officers cleared his throat and said, "That's everything, ma'am. We're done here." She didn't say another word. She just followed them out, clutching that photo like it burned her fingers. I stood in the doorway, watching as they disappeared down the driveway. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel broken. I felt something else. Clarity. The mask was gone. The lies were exposed. And what was left wasn't sadness, it was strength. Because I wasn't the one hiding anymore. And soon enough, the whole truth would come out. I had one last move to make. And this time, I wasn't holding back. The day after she came to collect her things, I filed for divorce. It was clean, direct, and backed by the folder of evidence I handed to my lawyer like a loaded weapon. He flipped through the pages, his eyebrows climbing higher with each one, until he finally looked up and said, "You've got enough here to bury her in court." "Good," I said. "Let her dig her own grave." I didn't tell Zara. I let the papers do the talking. They were served at Cale's door while she was inside playing house with him and his 2 boys. I could imagine her trying to keep her composure, brushing it off as, just paperwork, in front of them. But the timing wasn't an accident. I wanted Cale to see exactly what kind of woman he'd invited into his life, the kind who turns her child into a pawn, her husband into a backup plan, and lies so much she starts believing her own twisted version of reality. 2 days later, my phone rang. The caller ID was an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened, it was Cale. His voice was quiet, shaky. "Hey, man, I think we should talk. Call me back when you can." I didn't call him back. Let him sit with it. Instead, I took Sage fishing. We drove out to the lake just outside of town, no cell service, no distractions, just the sound of water lapping against the shore and the occasional bird overhead. For the first hour, Sage didn't say much. He just cast his line and stared at the water. Then, while tying a lure, he looked up at me and asked, "Do you think she ever loved us?" I didn't sugarcoat it. "I think she loved the version of us that was easy for her to love." He nodded slowly, his hand still working the line. "I don't miss her. Not the Zara she is now. But the ghost of who she used to be. I miss that." The woman who used to dance in the kitchen while pancakes burned. The girl who cried when we brought me home from the hospital. That version of her, she's gone. She died somewhere between Kale's abs and her sudden hatred for family dinners. When we got back home, there was a bouquet of flowers sitting on the porch. Cheap ones, still wrapped in plastic from the supermarket. No note. Just silence and desperation. I picked them up, walked to the trash can, and tossed them in without a second thought. Later that night, my lawyer emailed me a recording. The private investigator I'd hired had found something, a dinner. Kale and another woman, not Zara, sitting at the same restaurant Zara used to love. The waitress confirmed it, he'd been bringing the new woman there for over a month. The timelines overlapped. Karma, I guess, doesn't waste time. But I didn't tell Zara. Not yet. Instead, I sent her a single text, "Your fairy tale is cracking. I'd stay close to home this week." She replied 10 minutes later, "What the hell are you talking about?" I left it on read. 2 nights later, there was a knock at my door. It was late, 11 p.m. Sage was already asleep. I opened the door, and there she was. No Kale. No makeup. Just a hoodie, leggings, and her hair in a messy bun, but not the cute kind. The kind that screams unraveling. "Cassian," she started, her voice trying to sound calm but cracking at the edges. "Can we talk?" I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "No." She flinched, like she wasn't expecting that. "It's important." "What?" I asked, my voice flat. "Kale dumped you already?" Her lip twitched. That one hit harder than she expected. "I know you sent the papers. I got them. But maybe we rushed into this." I laughed right in her face. "You rushed?" I just stood there and watched. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "He's not who I thought he was." "Big surprise," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I made mistakes, okay? Big ones. I see that now." "No," I said, my tone sharp. "You didn't just make mistakes. You made choices. Over and over again." She went quiet for a moment, her eyes dropping to the ground. "I don't want Sage to hate me." "Then maybe you shouldn't have turned his home into a circus act with a stranger and his kids." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't know what else to do." "That's the problem, Zara," I said, my voice calm but cutting. "You never think past the moment. It's always about what feels good right now." And then, this part still stings, she reached out and put her hand on my arm. "Maybe we could fix this," she said softly. "For Sage." For a second, I just stared at her. Really looked at her. Then I stepped back, pulling my arm away. "I already did," I said. "I fixed everything the moment you walked out." I turned, opened the door, and shut it in her face. She didn't knock again. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Zara wasn't done yet. And neither was I. 3 days passed without a word. No flowers. No calls. No fake apologies. Just silence. Then Friday rolled around. I pulled into the driveway after work and saw her car already parked there, front wheels turned like she planned to stay a while. She was pacing in the front yard, arms crossed, dressed to kill. Tight black dress, heels too high for the grass, lipstick so red it looked like it might bleed. She looked more like she was heading to a nightclub than trying to fix a broken family. Sage was still at school. I had maybe 20 minutes before his bus dropped him off. I stepped out of the car without saying a word. She saw me and lit up with a practiced smile. "Cassian. You look good." I walked right past her toward the front door. "What do you want, Zara?" She followed me up the steps, trailing behind like a stray dog in designer clothes. I talked to Kale, she said, her tone casual, like we were old friends catching up. We decided it's not working out. We're too different. The boys didn't get along. Tragic, I said, unlocking the door. She didn't wait for an invitation, just slipped past me like the last few weeks hadn't happened, settling onto the couch like she still belonged there. I've been thinking, she started, smoothing out her dress. Maybe I made a mistake. You did make a mistake, I said, leaning against the wall with my arms crossed. A whole series of them, actually. I wasn't myself, she said, her voice soft and wide-eyed, the same look she used to give me when she crashed my car or maxed out the credit card. You know how lost I was. I needed attention. I needed to feel seen. I let out a bitter laugh. So you cheated. Lied. Humiliated me. Brought a stranger and his kids into our home to replace us. Then you accused me of abuse to cover your guilt, filed first with a lawyer to make me look unstable, and told our son he reminded you too much of me. Need me to keep going? Her smile faltered, cracking under the weight of my words. I just want another chance, she said, her voice trembling now. Not for me. For Sage. He deserves a full family. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the silence stretch. Then I told her the truth. I filed for full custody. You'll get visitation, supervised, until Sage decides otherwise. She shot to her feet, her face twisting with fury. You can't do that. I already did, I said, my voice calm and steady. You want to fight it? Bring your folder. I'll bring mine. Her eyes narrowed into slits. You think this makes you the better parent? No, I said, my voice rising just slightly. I think sticking around through every lie, every breakdown, every empty stare, every time you locked the bedroom door because you weren't in the mood for months, I think that makes me the better parent. You were cold. You were gone. We stood there, both of us breathing hard, like two fighters in the final round of a brutal match, neither willing to back down. And then I heard it, the sound of the school bus pulling up. I stepped out onto the porch just as Sage climbed off, his backpack half-zipped, his hair messy from the wind. He looked up and saw her standing there. And then he stopped walking, Mom. She smiled, her voice soft and sweet. Hey, baby. But Sage didn't smile back. His face stayed serious. Why are you here? I came to talk to your dad, she said, her tone dripping with fake warmth. Just grown-up stuff. He turned to me, his eyes searching for an answer. I gave him a small nod, letting him know it was okay. He walked up the steps and stood beside me, his shoulders squared. Are you staying? He asked her, his voice steady. I was hoping to, she said, her smile faltering just a little. No, he said firmly. You shouldn't. For a moment, her face cracked. The mask she'd been wearing slipped, and I saw it, fear, regret, and a flicker of something that might have been guilt. But it was too late for any of that to matter. Okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'll go. She turned and walked back to her car, her heels sinking into the soft grass with every step. Just as she opened the door, she looked back over her shoulder. He'll regret this one day, she said, her voice sharp. He'll ask why I left. Before I could respond, Sage spoke up. No. I'll remember why. And with that, he turned and walked inside, leaving her standing there. I followed him, closing the door behind me. For the first time in weeks, the house felt like it was mine again. Not perfect. Not whole. But honest. And I'd take that over her version of love any day. The following week was quiet, but not in a way that felt peaceful. It was the kind of silence that hums with tension, the kind that makes you feel like something's about to snap. By Wednesday evening, the pressure was building. I was setting plates down for dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, Sage's favorite, when my phone rang. Another unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut told me to answer. Cassian Taylor, a voice asked on the other end. Yes, I said cautiously. This is Officer Daniels with the County Sheriff's Department. We've received a complaint filed against you, allegations of harassment and possible endangerment of a minor. I froze, the words hitting me like a punch to the gut. What? The complaint was filed by Ms. Zara Taylor, he continued. She's alleging verbal threats, emotionally abusive behavior, and denial of access to her child. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. We're not pressing charges at this time, he added, his tone professional but firm. However, we will need a formal statement from you, preferably with your attorney present. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I understand. I'll have my lawyer contact you. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Sage looked up from the table, his brow furrowed. What's wrong? He asked. I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. Nothing, buddy. Just some paperwork I forgot about. I didn't tell him. Not yet. But inside, I was boiling. She couldn't just leave quietly. She couldn't accept that she destroyed something beyond repair and lost the only people who ever truly cared about her. No, she had to twist the knife. Now she was trying to paint me as the villain in her unraveling little drama. The woman who walked out of my life with another man was now trying to brand me as a danger to my son. After dinner, I called my lawyer. He wasn't surprised. She's cornered, he said matter-of-factly. She's realizing she picked the wrong side, and now she's trying to claw back control. The good news? You've documented everything. Let her come. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every lie, every time I'd ignored the warning signs. I should have seen this version of her a long time ago. But I didn't want to. I wanted to believe she was better than this, that she was lost, not cruel. But she was both. And the worst part? She was still Sage's mother. Court day. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting a tie I hadn't worn since my father's funeral. I didn't put it on for Zara. I put it on for Sage. To show him that some things, like dignity, are worth holding on to, even when everything else is falling apart. Sage wasn't with me, of course. I didn't want him anywhere near this circus. He was with my sister, probably playing Xbox and hopefully not thinking too much about what his parents were about to drag through the mud in front of a judge. When I arrived at the courthouse, my lawyer was already waiting for me. He was calm, composed, the kind of man who could walk through a burning building without breaking a sweat. I admired that about him. You ready? He asked, his voice steady. I nodded. Let's do this. She'll probably play the victim, my lawyer said as we waited. Tears, regret, the whole act. Let her. Stick to the truth. Let the paperwork do the talking. I nodded, gripping the edge of the table. He was right. The truth was all I needed. Zara arrived about 10 minutes later, dressed in a crisp white blouse like she was heading to communion instead of a courtroom battle. Her hair was tied back neatly, her makeup minimal, just enough to make her look like the picture of a grieving, discarded wife. Cale wasn't with her. Not anymore. I figured that implosion had happened quietly after his little side affair came to light. Good. Let her taste betrayal from the other side. The hearing started off calm enough, introductions, a rundown of the situation. Then her lawyer stood up and began spinning a story so warped I barely recognized it. Mrs. Taylor has endured years of emotional neglect, he said, his voice smooth and practiced. Her efforts to save the marriage were repeatedly dismissed. Yes, she made a mistake, but only after Mr. Taylor shut her out completely. Now, she simply seeks to rebuild her relationship with her son, who has been unfairly kept from her. Unfairly kept. The words made my blood boil, but I stayed quiet. My lawyer stood up next, calm and composed, the confidence of a man who knew he had all the receipts. And he did. Every text message. Every hotel receipt. Every missed call and failed meeting that left Sage in tears. The folder laid it all out, dates, times, her own words in black and white. The judge flipped through the evidence silently, his expression unreadable. But when he finally looked up at me, I didn't see pity. I saw understanding. Then it was Zara's turn to take the stand. That's when the real performance began. Tears streamed down her face. Her voice shook. She played the part of the broken woman perfectly, hitting every note like she'd rehearsed it 100 times. "I just want my family back," she whispered, her voice cracking at all the right moments. "I never meant to hurt anyone. Cale, it wasn't what it looked like. I was lost. I was empty. And Cassian, he didn't see me anymore." She turned to look at me, her eyes wide and pleading, like she expected me to nod, to apologize, to take some of the blame. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. When it was my turn, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just told the truth. "I loved her," I said, my voice steady. "I gave her everything. She didn't just leave, she blew up our family. She brought another man and his kids into our home, introduced them to my son like we were replaceable. And when it all fell apart, she tried to come back and paint herself as the victim." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle in the room. Then I added, "But this isn't about me. This is about Sage. And all he wants is peace." The silence that followed was deafening. It was louder than any argument we'd ever had. The ruling. 3 days later, the judge issued his decision. Primary custody was granted to me. Visitation for Zara would be every other weekend, supervised until a child therapist determined Sage was emotionally ready. Any violation of the agreement would result in an automatic suspension of her rights. When the judge read the ruling, Zara didn't cry. She didn't plead. She fumed. Her jaw tightened, her eyes darting between the judge and me like she thought the whole thing was rigged, like justice had betrayed her, too. Outside the courtroom, she caught up to me in the parking lot. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she stormed up to me, her face twisted with anger. "You think this is over?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You humiliated me in there." "No," I said, meeting her glare. "You did that to yourself. I just stopped covering for you." She leaned in closer, her voice turning sickly sweet. "You'll regret this. He's still my son." I didn't flinch. "You had a son. And you lost him the moment you chose a stranger over him." She didn't respond. She just turned and walked away, her shoulders stiff, her head held high like she still thought she'd won something. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Freedom. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the damage. But it was a start. Epilogue. That evening, I picked up Sage from my sister's house. We drove home in silence for a while, the hum of the car filling the space between us. Finally, he broke the quiet. "Did we win?" he asked, his voice small but curious. I smiled, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "We didn't lose. And for now, that was enough."